The next morning golden sunlight pierced through the tall glass window in the room, shining its golden rays on a figure who was peacefully asleep on the puffy white bed, clinging onto the sheets like a greedy drunkard clinging onto the last bottle of his alcohol. But then his eyes twitched once, and slowly, one of them opened up. His left one, giving one look at the peeking sunlight as his hand slowly rose to block the rays of light. But then, his eyes flashed as the right one instantly opened up and Ryuk jumped onto his butt in the next instant. I fell asleep. What happened? He mused to himself as he looked around the bed confusedly. But then, the events of the day before instantly coursed into his mind. Flooding like a dam with its gate opened and eyes flashed a moment later. His eyes zipped closed right after and his breathing went still. When he opened his eyes, he was in his mental realm. Like yesterday, there was the silhouette of the spectral figure, the skeleton of a dragon floating in the void of his mental realm formed from his mental vein. But unlike previously, the runes on its body had considerably dimmed. Still, there was no dark chains churning around. Ryuk's eyes flashed before he moved himself away from his mental realm, his eyes opening to the sight of the silvery white bedroom around him. But then, golden light flashed in front of his gaze. Congratulations, host, on completing the secret quest. Fully break open the locks present on your mental veins within a week. Rewards. Plus 200 stats points will be unlocked on all stats. Plus 400,000 EXP. Congratulations, host, on completing the secret quest. Reach the first stage of Aetheris cultivation. Rewards. Plus 500,000 EXP. Plus 1 awakened Aetheris skill evolution card. Plus 20 ability level up cards. Finally, I've broken through the locks and reached the first level of Aetheris cultivation. Ryuk muttered to himself as his hands clenched into his fists. This time not from pain, but from accomplishment. Activate System Interface. System Interface. Name: Ryuk Null. Race: half Jade Dragon, half Null. Age: 17. Apex Energy Cultivation. Frost Energy Cultivation. Initial plane of the stage of Cataclysm Void Energy Cultivation. Initial plane of the stage of Ascension. Aetheris Energy Cultivation. Initial Lucid Spark Stage. Level: 79. EXP: 1015000/773,000. Does host wish to level up? Yes. Congratulations. Host has leveled up to level 80. Plus 45 attribute points obtained. Stats: Strength: 1,300 locked. Agility: 1,350 locked. Endurance: 1,550 locked. Intelligence: 390, plus 100. Charisma: 200. Attribute points: 1,105. I've reached the initial stage of the Lucid Spark realm in my cultivation, and that also corresponds to an increase of 100 stat points in my intelligence. Huh? Ryuk muttered to himself as a new notification flashed. Correct, host. Growth in Aetheris energy will cause a growth in intelligence. Sounds fair. After all, when I break through to a new level in my Apex cultivation, the rest of my stats increase except my intelligence. But with Aetheris being an energy of the mind, it makes sense for only intelligence to increase. Now things are well balanced out. But not only that, my current stats are about 700 in strength, 650 in agility, and 450 in endurance. It is no longer a doubt now that I've surpassed my previous peak before I arrived here. Ryuk muttered to himself as he clenched and unfurled his fist. He could see the growth in strength. And unlike previously, that amount of strength was well controlled, perhaps even well concealed within him. It wasn't like before when it was so overpowering as if his body could no longer handle more strength. This time, the strength was subtle and well contained, able to be released in controlled bursts by Ryuk if he willed, and bearing not much strain on his body. It was another reminder that the body he was in now was levels above the ones he had before. Host possesses one high-quality ability evolution card for his previous Aetheris skill. Aegis of the Jade Dragon. A high-quality skill upgrade is unlike a basic ability upgrade because it causes the evolution of the skill into something higher and better instead of a simple level increase. Does host wish to try it out? The system asked as Ryuk fixed his gaze at the panel. But then his shoulders relaxed as he nodded his head. Yes. Congratulations on using a skill evolution card on a skill. Secret quest completed. Use a high-grade evolution card. Rewards. Plus 10 ability upgrade cards. Congratulations, host. Your Etherius skill. Aegis of the Jade Dragon has now evolved into a new skill. Details below. Previous Etherius skill. Skill. Aegis of the Jade Dragon description. Drawing upon Etherius, the energy of the will, the host bends the fabric of space, shaping it into an unbreakable shield. With a mere thought, they harden the air before them, turning it into solid jade. Additional effects. Momentum nullification. Instead of just absorbing force, the shield halts it completely, preventing even strong attacks from pushing through. The evolution card has been used on the skill, New Etherius skill. Skill. Draconic Grave March, LV.1. Type. Draconic Mindform skill. Etherius. Description. Each step the user takes after the skill's activation asserts the will of a sovereign dragon upon the surrounding space. A miniature domain is projected from the user's body, causing gravity and physical pressure to surge by hundreds of times. The very air becomes as dense and unyielding as jade, crushing all movement and momentum within the boundary of the domain. Safe for the user. Current limitations: domain radius at level 1, 5 meters weight multiplier, plus 200x base gravity step-based recenter. Only active while walking. Effects disperse as soon as the host step leaves the ground. The system notification flashed as Ryuk looked at the technique, studying its activation before he nodded his head. He couldn't use it now and test it out since he was the only one in the room, but he got the gist of the technique, and it was definitely an evolution of his previous Aegis of the Jade Dragon skill. With this, he could slow down both foes and attacks coming toward him. And if he leveled it up enough, then there was a possibility that everyone would freeze up completely, both attacks and movement, giving Ryuk the sole ability to move around. Now the name made even more sense in such a scenario. It would truly be a draconic grave march for his enemies. But even then, there were still unsure thoughts in his mind, as the memories of the previous day became clearer, and Ryuk just had a question. How? How did I end up back on my bed? I could remember soaring into the sky for whatever reason. But then, that's all there is to the memory. The part where I landed back from the sky and got to my bed isn't clear. So it must have been someone who brought me back? Just who? High Scholar Emeries. Ryuk wondered to himself. Also, the breakthrough must have caused quite the phenomenon. I wonder if the news already spread that it was me, or if whoever or whatever was responsible is still being looked for. He frowned but shrugged his shoulders as he rose up from his bed and made it properly. There's not much I can do, save for keeping quiet and attending the day like normal. And now it is closing in quickly, the time to go to class, he muttered before moving into the bathroom. Cultivation at the Cymancer stage comes with a significant change. All through the previous cultivation levels, which are the Lucid Spark and the Thoughtweaver stage, all you have been capable of possessing is none other than absorbing ether and trying to solidify the mind realm and create the mind core. But once the mind core has been fully created and well protected within the realm, it comes with access into something special. The words rang out through the green garden, where the various royalty children were seated, listening attentively to Instructor Kiana in front of the group. Amongst them, sitting silently and also listening attentively, was none other than Ryuk, who couldn't help but notice a couple of things. 1. The stares from the students had reduced compared to yesterday. It was like some of them had eyes on him through the entirety of the class yesterday, but that had lessened a lot, a sign of being used to his presence. And secondly was about Instructor Kiana. The piercing looks in her eyes had somehow reduced compared to the previous day. The previous day, she looked at him with a gaze that seemed to want to burrow into him. But now, her eyes were softer looking at him, almost the same expression as anyone sitting in the class. It was a significant change which Ryuk wasn't at all against. The birth of the capability of expanding consciousness. Your mind palace, which also houses your mind core, begins to expand into a mental realm. Within a mental realm, you gain more access to your own known knowledge and memories. You can choose to erase out some memories from your conscious brain, turning them into light constructs to be kept in your mind place and be read if you need them. Not only that, but you also begin to feel the power of mental projection, a natural effect of a Psymancer that allows them to influence not just senses, but also other minds. In this realm are those who are truly beloved by Ether revealed. Some of you will gain the ability to faintly see through thoughts, and some will even find a way to whisper into those thoughts, in a way that the one who is thinking about them will never understand you're the one who implanted the thought into them, she said, a word that made the eyes of some of the students gleam and reminded Ryuk of the half-fallen ones instead. She was able to read his mind. Something that he could now see was strongly more Ethers-focused than Apex Energy-focused. And I am pretty sure there are just a couple amongst you who can do this, and are secretly doing this, no? Instructor Kiana said with a sly smile, as the students all quieted down, looking at each other as if suspecting themselves, but none made a comment. Just know that it's fine if you can read minds and even alter them. Power is power and not really to be feared. How it is used is what counts. We have very powerful mind readers and alterers among the Guardians, who are also capable of reading minds and entering them, and they can see directly through your minds or even see what you used them to do in the past. So if you use your ability to do bad sooner or later, you'll be discovered by them and then be gravely punished. Those who can read and alter minds are treated like the heaven's sons and held in the highest regard in our royalty home. But their punishments are also the worst, since they can commit sins as grievous as that of the devils incarnate. Apart from being able to see and control thoughts, there are also other capabilities like being able to alter perception. Some of you here can expand your mental energy and make it seem like a patch of sea is present in the middle of this garden, she said. And Ryuk's eyes flashed as he looked beneath him and found a small puddle of water suddenly leaking out, staining his cloth. "What the hell?" he said out loud, resulting in a loud laughter of mockery filling the air as his eyebrow furrowed when he touched his clothes and saw it wasn't wet. But the water puddle was there, but not for long. In short, it was an illusion. Turning his gaze to the side, he sighted the one who was responsible for doing it, and it was none other than the white-skinned Princess Eliana, who was chuckling mischievously along with some of the girls. "TCH kids, as much as it is easy to cast an illusion, you must also be careful and know your limits. Let's take, for example, the illusion that was cast now by Eliana. Seems good, no?" And Ryuk himself was fooled for a few seconds. But then, he was able to identify it was an illusion by touching his clothes and seeing it wasn't wet. That shows that the illusions crafted are not always perfect. There are always loopholes, although these loopholes are easier to fix once a Psymancer progresses in his or her understanding. Also, it must be noted that illusions will work harder on those who don't cultivate ether than those who do. Those who do can see through it faster, while those who are just starting Etheric cultivation or have never practiced it will most likely fall for it. This is one of the superpowers of the Psymancer stage, the captivating power of illusion. A well-crafted illusion is as dangerous as a blade that has been repeatedly sharpened for 100 years. There are some illusions that could drown even an Eidon Lord within them, making them spend the entirety of their lives in nothing but an illusionary paradise, one that lasts hundreds of years, without the illusionist ever having to make a single move. It is an incredibly dangerous power if well studied, and it's one of the many paths of Etheric cultivation that many Psymancers opt for. When you become a guardian, you can choose to be an illusionist. Only then will you see the true capabilities of it. Instructor Keanu said as some of the students' eyes flashed, while others were blank. It was clear not all of them were easily captivated by the power of illusions, but not Ryuk. It was the first time he was hearing there was a group called illusionists out there, whose power was to trick one's senses, drowning them in illusions. That was something to watch out for. And another set of the powers of being a Psymancer is something that is pretty serious to explain in and of itself, And that is the existence of dimensions, she said, as the student's ears perked up. Amongst the various paths one could opt for in the core of Etheirys, the dimension path is quite possibly one of the hardest, but no doubt, it is one of the most powerful paths of Etheirys. And when you reach the Cymancer stage, like you all are, you start to begin noticing your affinity for dimensions. How, you may ask? Well, it is simple. It might start from you waking up to the thought that reality around you is weird, almost like an illusion. Or it might be opening your eyes and finding out the world has changed its color, or that an important law of reality has been erased. It could be opening your eyes to see you can no longer hear any sounds from people, even though they walk around. Or opening your eyes to see color fade away from people, or sometimes trying to grab at something, and watch your hands weave through it like it didn't exist. She explained as some of the students' eyes flashed. If you've ever woken up and sensed any of these symptoms, then it might just be that you're favored by the dimensional Etheirys energy. And one day, when you pass your coming-of-age ceremony and join the Guardians, you might receive training to become what is known as a dimensional walker. Those are the names given to those who lean toward the control of dimensions, capable of going in and out of dimensions as they want. But mind you, dimension entering is a potential ability for all who cultivate Etheirys to possess. At least, an Etheirys cultivator, once they reach the Iden Lord realm, should be able to open the closest dimensions, which is the Azar dimension, even if they're but an illusionist. But if your sole purpose is studying dimensions, you will no doubt be an incredibly powerful warrior. Dimensional walkers aren't like crafty illusionists. They are warriors that could change the tide of battles in a blink. Dimensions are just that powerful, she explained, and Ryuk noticed some of the males' eyes flashed. It seems the males preferred the path of dimensional walkers instead. Ryuk was already used to the dimensional part. No, he knew Astralaxia was a dimensional walker, and even the Ruin Guardian who he had fought was a dimensional guardian. And true to Instructor Kiana's words, Aster and the Ruin Guardians are truly good at direct combat. In the Cymancer stage, the ultimate goal is fleshing out the expanse of your consciousness, understanding more and more what your Etheirys energy concentrates on, and sticking to that. But of course, just because you find someone easily crafting illusions doesn't mean you should jump into it and do the same all your life. You can always venture through many different paths. A good example is that one of our ancient ones, High Scholar Emeries, is one of the most capable experts of Etheirys cultivation of our race, she said, perking the students up as murmurs instantly filled the garden. Ryuk remained silent, but his ears were twitching as he silently picked up on all the murmurs. I hear that he is the strongest Silverunic alive. Stronger than even the mighty king himself. That's nothing. I heard he is the father of the king himself. He is supposed to be the current king, but for some reason refused to, instead passing it on to King Orimes instead. Why would he do such a thing? I don't know. Maybe he just doesn't want the fame. HM. Instructor Kiana loudly warmed her throat, silencing them all. What is important to note about High Scholar Emiris is that at a young age like you, was able to control all known Etheirys paths. Instructor Kiana said as Ryuk watched a reverent glint flash in her eyes. He is the greatest genius the Silverunic race has ever produced. At just the Cymancer stage, he could already unleash the Azar dimension and was even already stepping into the boundaries of the Ashra dimension. He was able to set up an illusion formation that trapped an entire enemy army for weeks when he went to his coming-of-age ceremony, ensuring the Silverunics could prepare themselves for an entire week before the battle finally started. And he's also a very powerful runic inscriber. He not only practiced the meditation patterns. The truth was, out of the 999 rune meditations, he was the one who created a total of 333 runic patterns out of those 999, and he did all of this while just being at the Cymancer stage, the exact same stage as you all. He controls the dimension better than his age could. He lays illusions that would make most guardian illusionists jealous, and he could inscribe runes that could turn an ordinary metal into a might blade. Incredibly vast in the ancient art, remodeling the runic meditation art of our Silverunic race, creating new ones that have made us what we are today. What's more, it is said that he has found another new path of Aetheris cultivation. An absolutely new path that has never been tread by anyone at all or even recorded by our Silverunic race at all. Really? Most of the students said, eyes flashing from the desire to know the new path, and Ryuk was no exception. However, that is one of our race's secrets that can't be revealed until you reach the Guardian stage. My point is, it is always possible to stick through many things at once. You don't have to limit yourself to a single path. You can be like High Scholar Amiris, a genius in every path of Aetheris. I got the permission from High Scholar Emery's, said Instructor Kiana, her voice carrying through the green grass where she sat with none other than Ryuk. The rest of the students had already left. Permission for what? Ryuk began asking when he watched an object slip out from the void and appear in her hands. A silvery white book, with dots of silvery Aetheris swirling around it, revealing it was an Aetheris cultivation manual. "Oh, you got the manual?" he asked as he nodded. She turned to him but then shook her head. "But I don't think you'll be needing it," she said. A thump echoed in Ryuk's heart, but he asked anyway, "And why is that?" "Because one can only change their Aetheris manual once they reach the Iden Lord realm. If you're below that, you're stuck with whatever manual you used to start your cultivation. And I know you already have a cultivation manual of your own. If so, you won't cause as much chaos as you did the previous night," she explained as the silvery white grimoire faded from her hands. She stared at Ryuk with narrowed eyes, her lips holding a knowing grin. "I was wondering how I got back into my bed." "So it was you," he said. "Disappointed?" she teased, and Ryuk rolled his eyes. "No, I'm not. And thank you, anyway, for not leaving me to sleep cold in the night." It wasn't just about sleeping cold in the night. A couple of elders were alerted by the disturbance, and are currently looking for whoever is responsible. If they had caught you sleeping there last night, you probably would have woken up in chains, she said, her tone now serious, confirming Ryuk's suspicions that there really could be consequences for whatever caused the anomaly. The scene last night was too big, but even Ryuk didn't know just how big it truly was. But then there was a problem. If she knew he was the one who caused the scene, and the elders were actively searching, why wouldn't she turn him in? "You don't need to worry about that," she said suddenly, as if reading his mind. "If I wanted to sell you out, I would have just left you there and let the elders do their thing. And why would you do that? Choose a machine boy you barely know for a day over the acknowledgement of your own race?" he asked. Instructor Kiana shrugged her shoulders. "I don't need much acknowledgement from my race. I've already earned enough of that. And I saved you to get an explanation from you. I want to see something of yours." "And what is that?" Ryuk asked. "Your cultivation manual. The one that caused so much chaos from a simple absorption. I want to see it." Ryuk's eyes flashed. He wondered if he should get out of there with force or lie his way through. But in the end, he stretched forth his hands, and then the ground shook as a gigantic grimoire slammed into it, shocking Instructor Kiana speechless. She rose to her feet, her hand reaching out to pick up the heavy book, only for her eyes to flash midway as she felt its weight. "So heavy." "There it is," Ryuk said with not much more than a shrug as he watched Instructor Kiana pick it up, opening the book and scanning through it. She read with such speed that she was done in just about 2 minutes. Her eyes narrowed as she closed the book and looked at Ryuk. "It's impossible to cultivate unless you have big veins?" she asked, incredulous. "Exactly. So even if your elders want it from me, or you yourself want to seize it, you'd all just end up exploding one by one. No Aetheris cultivator but me can cultivate it. So I'm not afraid of anyone finding out," Ryuk said with a shrug. Instructor Kiana furrowed her brows before reading through the book one more time. Finally, she closed it and handed it back to Ryuk. "I wasn't planning on cultivating it. Our Silverunic Requiem is still the best cultivation technique in the entire Metasla world, and we have more than enough ether cultivation tomes to choose from, including forbidden ones. One more forbidden technique, especially one as dangerous as yours, isn't needed," she said with pride. Ryuk Simple shrugged his shoulders. Judging from yesterday, I guess you should have been able to find out your mental veins and even managed to absorb some ethers, right? And I can sense now that you're finally at the initial lucid spark stage. That's good improvement for a single night. Now you need to keep growing from the initial lucid spark stage to the peak stage. And all you need to do until then is keep absorbing etheric energy as much as you can. So today, we won't be doing much but cultivating. Let's begin already, Instructor Kiana said as she took her seat once more, a silvery aura of ether soon leaking from her as she silently began her cultivation. Ryuk looked down for a while before he, too, calmed his breath. But instead of sitting, he rose to his feet, something that didn't escape the notice of Instructor Kiana, whose eyes remained closed but brows raised questioning. As Ryuk stood, his hands came together and began forming the sigils once more. Then his lips started to move in sync. Instructor Kiana's eyes fully opened when she felt the air for miles suddenly gather around Ryuk, forming a revolving column around him. She watched as his feet slowly lifted off the ground and then, ether energy began pouring into Ryuk like a dam breaking, as he remained standing upright in the air, silently phasing into cultivation. One truly has to stand to cultivate this technique. Of all the ether cultivation tomes I've read about, I've never seen anything like it, she silently mused to herself. But then she noticed how Ryuk remained in the same state, cultivating without any sign of distress. Eventually, she closed her eyes again and resumed her own cultivation. Peace and silence descended into the green garden. 5 days later, finally, the words echoed loudly through the mental realm, where stood none other than the skeletal figure of a creature. Its humongous height of about 100 meters was covered in various runic lines that bloomed off its surface, radiating a mixture of blue and golden dusts of light. But what one would find peculiar was that around its skeletal figure, there was a covering similar to that of flesh, only this one was made of dots of light, making it resemble a phantom of a living dragon. The dragon, now in much clearer shape, was in a position that seemed to be roaring at the sky. But at the top of its maw, there was a ball of blue energy, around the diameter of a meter, hovering just above its wide-open mouth. In the end, the dragon wasn't roaring. It was trying to conjure a ball. But what it conjured wasn't just a ball. It was Ryuk's. Finally completed my mind core. Ryuk's voice echoed through the realm as he gave one last look at the draconic phantom and the shimmering ball-like core of golden blue energy before his consciousness dispersed from the realm. When he opened his eyes, a powerful boom of golden energy mixed in with blue splashes left those irises, as he slowly floated down to the grassy ground. In front of his gaze, there was a notification flashing. Congratulations, host, on breaking through to the Thoughtweaver stage. A new stat has been recorded on host's stats panel. Ether. All remaining locked stat points have been fully unlocked. Congratulations, host, on the monumental increase in power level. The system congratulated him as Ryuk's eyes finally flashed with a smile before he ordered. Activate stats panel. Strength, 1000. Agility, 1000. Endurance, 1000. Intelligence, 700. Mana, 600. Ether, 200. Charisma, 200. Luck, null. Attribute points. Right now, Ryuk voiced out as he raised his head up to the sky, the gentle breeze causing his hair to calmly flick around. I would face an eternity stage expert head-on. Close to a week had passed, and Ryuk had done nothing but train harder each night. He'd cultivated Etherius for around 8 hours until his mental veins could no longer take more, and then he'd move on to the next task immediately. Track zone, endurance zone, combat zone. Training all night long and giving himself around 3 hours to rest and recuperate. He had done everything within these past few days, going all out with improving his strength. And now, he was officially twice as strong as he previously was on Enderath. When he was at the pseudo-eternal stage, his stats were just about 400 or so. But now, with most of his main stats at a full 1000, Ryuk had no doubt he could face an Eternity Stage expert head-on with just his pure physical prowess, although that had yet to be fully tested out. The strength he felt right now, it wasn't something he himself could possibly fathom. It was a feat to say even he didn't know how strong he was. Just that there would be absolute chaos if he fully unleashed himself. "How's it going, machine boy?" The words suddenly rang out behind him as he turned his head, finding a tall lady wearing long silvery robes standing behind him, her hands crossed into each other. She had a smile on her face, one resembling more of a tease, as Ryuk grinned. "Pretty well," he replied smiling, as he watched a silvery light flash in her eyes before her face contorted in surprise. But then it soon faded away as she shook her head helplessly. "You've reached the Thoughtweaver stage?" she said with slight surprise, as Ryuk made his way towards her. "Surprised?" he asked when he arrived by her side, before moving past as Kiana inhaled deeply and then exhaled. For close to a week now, she had sat by his side every night of training, watching him progress in his cultivation, and she could confidently say she had never seen a monster like him before. From cultivating for long hours, absorbing an unbelievable amount of ethers, to going into the plateaus and training to the peak level of all the available track zones. Many times, she had watched Ryuk train until he could barely even lift himself off the ground. And the machine boy whose existence she had barely acknowledged previously had managed to amaze her, with nothing but pure hard work and consistency. Bloodied, tired, yet never once complaining about it being too hard. He only ever smiled through it all, sometimes laughing loudly when she shook her head at him. She had gotten used to him after it all, and now, seeing him break through to the Thoughtweaver stage, it should have been expected, since she knew the ethers he absorbs every night was an absurd amount. But when she also viewed the fact that he had barely started cultivating ethers for what seemed like a week, it left her simply speechless. And once more, she felt her heart warming. "Safe to say it's pretty expected. You've worked hard for it after all," she said, as she turned behind to look at Ryuk, who shrugged but suddenly stopped as he turned to look back at her. "Quite the outfit you're wearing. What's with the change?" He couldn't help but ask her as she saw her silver robes. A week of being with Kiana and Ryuk felt closer to her than ever. For once, he never needed to actively hide anything. He didn't need to hide from her what he was, a robot. He didn't need to hide from her the cultivation technique he was using. He didn't need to hide from her about how hard he trained or limit his strength, like he usually have to do around those he knew. And after all that, he had eventually gotten used to her presence. Safe to say, she was the only person amongst the Silverunics whose presence he didn't find irritating. "Took you long enough to find out," she said with a scoff, before her face grew serious. "The king, along with his elders, requests a presence with all of the royalty children and the ancients of the races. I've been asked to fetch you. A meeting at 1 o'clock midnight? That's quite impromptu, no?" Ryuk couldn't help but ask as a chained object, none other than the special pocket watch, that was given to him by High Scholar Emeries, appeared in his hands. Ryuk had eventually grown used to using the time, and he simply wrapped the chains around his wrist and fingers for easy access. "Actually, it's been announced to us all since 3 days ago, and I thought it better to leave you to your training than worry about it. To be fair though, I would argue I've already informed you about it 6 days ago," she added, and Ryuk's eyes flashed before he remembered her words. "Just to let you know, you might be participating in the coming-of-age ceremony with the others. And that too, a week from now, I think." She had indeed mentioned the coming-of-age ceremony taking place soon, and that he might be required to attend. "Just not today and neither at 1 o'clock at night." "Fine. Let's get going then," he replied, but then heard her giggle. "What? You didn't think you'd be allowed in the presence of the king, his elders, and all of the ancients in a simple round-neck shirt and training trousers, did you?" she asked as Ryuk looked at himself, and true to her words, that was exactly what he was wearing. "I'm pretty sure the last time I saw them all, I was donning ordinary patient wear. This is much better, no?" he protested, but she vehemently shook her head. "You need to go change," she said, her words leaving no room for debate, and Ryuk could only shrug his shoulders helplessly. Just so you know, I take about 3 hours to get nicely dressed. You sure you want to wait that long? The air beneath his feet faintly flapped as he pressed off the ground with strength, shooting up into the sky before he arrived at the tip of the higher flooring. Gently stepping down, he continued his walk and resumed heading toward the building. Well, the elders are already finding ways to ruin your name, so you might as well give them that chance by arriving late. And you only have 30 minutes before you're deemed late. I would hurry if I were you, she added before watching him step into the house, the glass door locking behind him. Ah, why do I feel things are about to get pretty lively soon? In the royal home of the Silverunics, King Orimi's throne room, the silvery white throne room was filled to the brim with Silverunics. Males and females dressed in royal attire decorated in shining silvery lights. Some simply stood by the sides, drinks in hand, as they discussed in whispers. Gentle music could be heard throughout the hall, with most Silverunics dancing in the center of the throne room. Ladies and gentlemen, hand in hand, swayed here and there to the rhythm of the music, while others stood by the sides sipping from glass cups that were delivered by the maiden Silverunics that moved around with trays in hand. It seemed like a ballroom party, but the notable focus was that, on the throne sat King Orimis and Queen Ilarith, seated at the oval end of the room. Around them were seats where the elders sat, 5 men to the right-hand side of the king, and 5 women to the left-hand side of the queen. To complete the arrangement was a circular seat that spanned both ends, and on it sat a total of 24 seats. Though only 23 of these were filled, the remaining seat left vacant and individually glaring to the eyes of all. And sitting on these 23 were none other than the royal children that Ryuk undertook the classes with, sitting silently, backs to the people and facing the king and queen. Sitting just below the throne room were some grand seats placed just slightly beneath those of the elders. Seated there were older Silverunics with clear conversations ongoing between them, their gazes sometimes drifting to the Silverunics dancing at the center. The sight would resemble that of an ongoing ball party on Earth, the aura smooth and steady. Even though the king and queen seemed to be silent, mouthing no words, a lot of communication was ongoing between King Orimis, his elders, and the ancients, all conducted telepathically. Seems to me, Your Highness, that the younglings are already here, and all of the elders, along with us ancient ones, are present as well. Why have you chosen to keep your peace still? Feels to me like you're awaiting a presence. The words echoed directly in the mind of King Orimis, who flashed a smile at one of the ancient ones sitting at the table below. You see through me so well, Chronolord Valeth. Truly, we all are awaiting a presence. King Orimis replied with a smile as the ancient one's eyes furrowed. If you don't mind me asking, my lord, who could this new presence be? A guest from the outside supreme races, perhaps? The question came right after, as King Orimis calmly replied. Oh, mind Architect Enzara, he addressed the silvery-haired woman who had asked. I believe it will be better if the truth isn't unfurled just yet. I, quite selfishly, wish to keep it a surprise. But worry not. The one who kept us waiting is already close. King Orimis replied as the crowd watched him turn his head in the direction of the entrance. Immediately, all heads in the room followed, looking in the same direction. A golden ripple spread across the ginormous 10 meters tall door, and with a deep rumbling, it soon opened up as a figure stepped through. A figure, none other than a lady covered in shining silvery robes. Oh, isn't that little Kiana? I'm pretty sure I saw her around just a couple minutes ago, one of the ancient elders said, but then they soon watched as Kiana stepped aside, and then, a figure stepped into the room. And for a fleeting second, everyone's heart in the room paused in its beat. The moment he stepped into the ballroom, the atmosphere snapped. The music cut off. Conversations died. Every being in the room, most of whom were either Edian lords or astral-crowned experts, felt it. The weight, not of hostility, not of intent, just mere existence. Ryuk had arrived. He wore a radiant white jacket trimmed with flowing gold, the fabric shifting like woven starlight. It clung perfectly to his frame, tailored to match a body carved by divine symmetry. Underneath, a flat white shirt rested against his chest, spotless, unmarred. His trousers matched, smooth, straight, and sharp at every edge. Not a single thread out of place. He wore no crest, no ornaments. His aura did not flare. He didn't need it. His physique was sculpted, not in the exaggerated form of brutes, but in the refined elegance of one meant to rule. Slim, athletic, silent. White hair flowed back in smooth, soft layers, tipped in a subtle golden sheen like stardust dancing in the wind. His skin held a soft shimmer, like moonlight over still water. His eyes, sky blue and endless, swept across everyone in the room, holding no hostility, only stillness. And that stillness was what shook the hearts of most. Everyone in the room could feel their instincts, buried under mountains of power, screaming at what stood before them. Then, his gaze settled on one of the ancient elders, none other than High Scholar Emeries. And finally he smiled, a smile so soft, so young. More than one heart in that hall forgot how to beat. High Scholar Emeries smiled in return, nodding his head, and Ryuk turned towards the king. His form shifted, sliding gracefully onto one knee, his hand over his chest and his head bowed low. Then, a voice, steady and respectful, cut through the hall. This youngling offers his greeting to His Majesty, King Orimes, High Sovereign of the Silverunic, and voice of the Silverunic line. The hall remained absolutely silent with tension stretching thin like a blade. From the obsidian throne, King Orimes' spine straightened. His runic silver eyes studied the boy before him, not with disdain, but of profound interest. The greeting Ryuk had offered was an ancient one meant to honor the past Silverunic kings, rarely known even among the current royals. His father, High Scholar Emeries, had merely mentioned a willingness to let his robotic experiment participate in the coming-of-age ceremony. King Orimes had agreed, but he had not expected this. No, this was someone whose existence alone demanded every fragment of his attention. And so he subtly leaned forward and spoke, his voice deep and smooth. Rise, Ryuk, living heir to a race that outcrafted time itself. A faint hum passed through the hall as some of the elders and ancients widened their eyes at the king's reply. One of our ancients, High Scholar Emeries, once told me that you, his greatest creation, would walk the line between legacy and anomaly. I see now. He spoke true. He leaned back slightly on his throne, approval behind his gaze. Come, take your seat before me. Ryuk rose to his feet, walking forward, his steps echoing lightly through the room amidst hushed voices. High Scholar Emeries' greatest creation? Could he be the machine brought into the royal home just a week ago? There's no way that's true. His aura is anything but from a sewage runic gate. Then, just who is he? Did you notice how fluent he was in ancient greetings? To Ryuk, it was as if he could hear their voices flowing around him. Yet none could enter his ears as he made no reaction. All eyes followed him as he arrived before the king and the elders, taking his seat among the remaining royal children, filling the one. But then a voice echoed in his mind, nearly making him lose all composure. Tisk, seems like your shameless act of pestering Princess Filiana of the Silverunic race about their culture and etiquette finally paid off. Didn't think the tongue of a crownless commoner like you would be so smooth. Hey, regard me with respect. Ryuk shouted inwardly at the system that sneered in his head. Also seems like putting 300 stat points in charisma and getting that artifact wear from the shop paid off too. And I must say, this outfit you're donning is the first one that could legally be said to belong to you, bought with your own money. All this while you've donning on gifted clothes. TCH. Miserable brat. The system rubbed even more and Ryuk could only smile wryly in his heart. It was right, though. When Ryuk had learned from Kiana about the upcoming gathering of the king, the elders, and the ancients, he'd decided to make himself presentable, just a bit. How? He'd placed 300 stat points into his charisma stat, making it reach 500 in total, and checked if the system shop offered any clothing artifacts. Surprisingly, he had found one. Absolutely perfect and had instantly bought it, though the feeling was like losing his eyes. It was worth it. The current Ryuk possessed a lot of purchasing points, and he'd forced his greed down as he spent 25,000 points to buy the outfit. It even came with a special effect, boosting his charisma by an extra 100 points, and surrounding him with a subtle energy that soothed and cooled the eyes of all who looked upon him. One could say he had gone all out for this, and for once he wasn't being looked down on. Even the elders from just a week ago, those who once seemed ready to stab his neck with their gaze, were surprisingly regal in their demeanor now. Their eyes still flickered with suspicion, but no longer with disgust like the first time he saw them. The throne room had gone silent, with questions raging through the mind of the people. Therefore, King Arimes felt it was finally time to set the ball rolling, and he calmly rose up his feet as all the standing Silverunics headed back to their seats, their eyes looking up at their king. All held reverence and respect. Ancients of the Silverunics, and my esteemed royal bloods. It is with honor that we're all gathered here today to undergo what will be known as the 1118th coming-of-age ceremony of our current Silverunic royalties, King Arimes said, rising to his feet. To us Silverunics we are guided by, and made who we are by our traditions. And in our traditions, one of the most revered rulings is the coming-of-age ceremony. A ceremony performed by our younglings to see if they're worthy of being guardians of our race. It's been present since the time of my great-grandfather, High Sovereign Aeolus, and my grandfather, High Sovereign Goliath. And now that the torch has been passed directly to me, I see it as a must to continue the legacy. But worth noting is, back then, the coming-of-age ceremony was done in quite the spectacular way. A group of 5 younglings would be made to follow a group of 3 guardians into the battlefield back when Metasla was still at a great war that threatened to sever it into fragments. It was a task difficult in and of itself, but if any of the younglings managed to make it back alive, then they were proclaimed guardians, and only then were they taught in the true ancient ways of us Silverunics. Trained hard to become the future guardians, and made ready to protect against any threats that might come later. But now that we Silverunics have won the war, with the calamities having weaved past us, then how? How are the younglings now prepared to be guardians? Do we just look at the one most talented and plaster the name guardian on them? He asked the crowd, who all had their eyebrows furrowed. That might be easier said than done. But when dangers truly come, then we will have nothing but a bunch of untrained kids standing at the front of the gate, protecting against nightmarish creatures from hell. Our end will be just in sight. After all, as we all know, the darkness never completely leaves. It just retreats, only to come back when it seems like the light will continue to shine forever. That's why it is necessary that the names, the identity of guardians, must be preserved through the coming-of-age ceremony, irrespective of the current situation of us Silverunics, he said, earning the unison nod of the Silverunics. But then an ancient elder raised his hand up amongst the crowd. Yes, Lore-Keeper Alluvier, King Arimes said as the elder rose up. Ryuk couldn't turn back and look at him, since they were turning their backs against the crowd and sending his senses roaming around would be disrespectful. So in the end, he could do nothing but listen silently. I believe all of us here know the importance of the guardians. True to your words, we cannot just allow for the younglings to become a guardian just because there is no longer war to be fought. Not only would that make us develop a litter of puppies when a pride of lions arrives, it will also be a disrespect to all the souls in the past that have undergone the coming-of-age ceremony and lost their lives to it, along with those who returned but were eternally scarred by it. It will be the greatest unfairity to ever be recorded in the history of us Silverunics, he said, something that drew the nod of most, if not everyone. But the question I believe we all wish to know now is, what other way have you found, my lord, to remedy the battlefield? What could test the younglings enough that will be as great as the text of the ancient guardians of the past? What did you think they can go through and in which doing so will keep the dignity of the guardians that they will be labeled with on their successful arrival? He asked before taking his seat, as King Arimes smiled and, without mincing any more words, he replied, I have just one answer, he said, and Ryuk couldn't help but notice a stifling silence settled onto everyone in the room. So much so, if a pin dropped to the ground, it would probably be heard for miles. All of the royalty kids will be sent into the gate of soulless ruin. What? The scream that followed was earth-shattering, as Ryuk watched horrified outbursts bloom out of the elders, along with the ancient ones. The air howled madly as space shattered into nothing, but just before Ryuk and the others could be swallowed by the destruction, a deep wave of powerful silvery aura emanated from the queen herself, covering all of the royalty children in a cocoon of energy. And as the wave smashed head-on onto the barrier, it cracked a bit, but never really broke through it, keeping all of them safe within. Immediately that happened, every single person in the room instantly rose to their feet as Ryuk felt all the heads in the room bow down to the direction of the queen. "Forgive us our disrespect, Queen Ilarith." The words resounded all at once. But then the queen retracted her barrier before raising her hand up. "Let the meeting continue," she said as everyone raised their heads back before turning to the king, and then the loud ruckus began. "Send the kids to the gates of soulless ruin? That is an ancient punishment from the past. They all will die within." The ruse was unending, but what was unsettling to Ryuk was, he was as clueless as a donkey as to what the gate of soulless ruin was. But all he needed to do was turn by side and look at the remaining royalty kids, who all had their faces pale even though they all remained silent. King Orimis remained silent after his proclamation, allowing the murmur to continue, unobstructed until silence. The roar followed by an incredibly powerful wave of aura. One so powerful that the walls of the hall they were in seemed to tilt, as if unable to stand in the presence of it descended onto everyone. This time, Ryuk could no longer hold his curiosity back as his head snapped a complete 180 degrees behind him to stare at who was responsible. And the man who was responsible was an old ancient one, long gray hair with a single eye patch covering his face. Both of his hands slammed with force onto the table as his covered eye released a billowing crimson light that reeked of murder and madness burning out of the silvery eye patch. "None shall speak unless the king orders it, and death to all who defy the law." Immediately after, pin-drop silence followed as all the murmurs were instantly quelled. Once silence was regained, the murderous aura in the air retreated back to the Ancient One, who slowly took his hand off the table as he calmly sat back in his seat. "The reason why you're all shocked is very well understood by me," King Orimis said, his voice as calm and as deadly as ever. "It is right for you all to be afraid, and heartwarming it is, as your fear is not born of your own lives, but the lives of the younglings. The gates of soulless ruin is a punishment ground for the evildoers among us, most especially used on those who have betrayed us, falling to the words and promise of the enemies. It was something that even the guardians themselves used to fear, as we all know once one goes in, then only the righteous will exit. It used to go by the phrase, 'Throw a silver runic into the gate of the soulless ruin. If he is indeed as righteous as he claims, then he would return alive. But if he holds even one blot of darkness within him, then he would be forever lost inside.' And frankly, of the 100% of people who have gone into the soulless ruin, only about 20% have returned. Even those who returned are not without harm," he explained as the silver runic nodded their heads. The gate of soulless ruin was truly as monstrous as mentioned. There had never been one who was cast into it and came out unscathed. But as we all know, the one in charge of such ruins is none other than the one who bears the title of High Scholar. Only a person in such a post could explain to us what the gate of soulless ruin really is, and today, I will be leaving this explanation to High Scholar Emeries to let us truly know what it is," King Orimis said, taking a seat. Back on the throne, every gaze turned to look at High Scholar Emeries, who had been silent all the while since the beginning of the meeting, never talking or making a move, until finally, he rose from his seat. "It is simple. Those who are to be killed will die in the gate of soulless ruin, and those who are to survive will survive. All who are to be killed or to be alive is in the power of the royal blood of the king and the elders. Not in the hands of a ruin," High Scholar Emiris said, his voice calm and steady, bringing shock to everyone in the hall. "You all think the gate of soulless ruin is like a gate to hell, but to be fair, you really don't understand. It is rumored that even hell itself has its own floors. And that is exactly what the Gate of Soulless Ruin is. A slow, drilling descent into death and torture. It has a total of 9 levels. None would survive the last level, and most could only survive the lower levels based on how strong they were, he explained, a sickened silence reigning all over. You think we throw people in, and if they return alive, they must be innocent. But that's a lie. If they return alive, it's because the Ancient Ones and the King want them to return alive. And for that reason, they will throw them in for what they believe is just enough to make them suffer, but not kill them. If one has been decreed to be responsible for the crimes they committed, they will be outright thrown to the 9th level, where they will not last a second before they are killed. And all I say is from experience, he said, drawing a gasp from many of the people in the room. You have gone into the Gate of Soulless Ruin? One of the ancients asked as High Scholar Emeries nodded. Of course I have. Why do you think the test to be a High Scholar is the most difficult yet least spoken of? It's because you have to climb into the levels of the Gate of Soulless Ruin and reach the 8th level, and come back down all the way while remaining alive. I've gone to the 8th level, and by how dangerous it is, I'm pretty confident none among us will reach the 9th and manage to survive. But the point is, there are levels to it, and one could survive if thrown to lower levels. This is what my King Orimes hopes to take advantage of. The Gate of Soulless Ruin holds as much fear as the battlefield of the ancients, if not greater. So there is no better way to test the younglings unless we go ahead and create a battlefield. But to cause a full-blown war just because of a coming-of-age ceremony is far too fragile. Hence, why not send them to the Gate of Soulless Ruin? And having been through a coming-of-age ceremony myself, gone through almost all floors of the Soulless Ruin, I can confidently say I now know what level is enough just to test the average-ranking soldiers, he explained, drawing a thick mist of silence across the room. When they all thought long and hard about it, they realized High Scholar Emery's words made more sense. The Soulless Ruin truly was the only one that came close to the ancient battlefield in terms of fear factor. And if it's truly level-based, as mentioned, and High Scholar Emir has gone through it, then it made even more sense. It made the children's fate even more reasonable and just enough to safeguard the honor of being a guardian, as entering the Gate of Soulless Ruin and managing to return alive was more than enough proof that one is worthy to be trained. And now they could finally see the reason why the king, who is no doubt the one who fears the most for the younglings, will suggest it. After all, among the children that are going to enter the ruin, the king's own 2 and only daughters were amongst them, Filiana and Eliana. If the Gate of Soulless Ruin will kill everyone that enters it, then why would the king send his own only 2 daughters inside to die? According to my knowledge, the levels where the kids are allowed to venture without facing death will be the 2nd level. Any more, and they will meet their death. So the test will be simple. To test the current average Silverunic younglings and for the next year to come. They will be required to walk through the first step of the Gate of Soulless Ruin, down past its chaos, and then arrive in the 2nd level, passing through all its dangers. At the end of the 2nd level, that hold the gate of the 3rd level, there will be a vortex waiting for them to send them back here. If they can do this, then they can successfully be guardians of the realm, without doubt of their ability at all. After High Scholar Emery's words, the hall went absolutely silent as High Scholar Emeries proceeded to take his seat. A total of about 5 minutes passed, hushed silence amongst the Silverunics, with the king allowing it all to continue. Then, when the shock finally faded away, the king rose to his feet. I'm sure you all by now must have agreed to my suggestion. After all, it is the only way to go about it if the dignity and honor of the ancient guardians are to be preserved. And not to mention, unlike in the past where the average runic soldiers were unprepared but had no choice but to go through the coming of age, the current younglings have been trained for 6 years now, continuously. 3 times the amount of time the previous average soldiers were trained, and therefore had enough time to prepare themselves mentally and physically. So I believe they all should be more than capable of passing their coming of age. But to make things fair, I have decided to improve the rewards of being a guardian too, he said. A word that perked the ears of every Silverunix in the room. If any of the current younglings manage to walk through the first step of the Gate of Soulless Ruin, pass its trial, descend onto its next level and also pass its trail, and manage to arrive before the portal with even just a breath. The portal will not lead them here directly, but instead, they all will be instantly transported straight into the soulful ruin of Niagara. The soulful ruin of Niagara. That is our most sacred grounds. Some of the elders murmured in shock. Another round of murmuring began, but they had all learned their lesson the first time, and so they kept it hushed down. Yet the one who had the most invisible shock was Ryuk. Soulful ruin of Niagara. If I remember correctly. Welcome, Trail Taker, to the first trail ruin of Morta Niagara. Rewards beyond your imagination lie beyond the completion of this task. The ruin I entered was called Ruin of Morta Niagara, and now the reward for passing the trial will be entering the soulful ruin of Niagara. Could these names be mere coincidence? Or could the reward mentioned be the one referred to as the soulful ruin of Niagara? Will I be transported back once I reach the soulful ruin of Niagara grounds? The thought couldn't help but flash in Ryuk's head, making him almost forget about his surroundings, until he felt a tap on his shoulder coming from none other than Filiana's touch. His gaze refocused as he raised his head to the sight of the queen signaling for them to rise to their feet, and Ryuk followed in the motion. Not to be a bother, High Scholar Emeries. King Orimes beckoned as the High Scholar Emeries moved to the center of the throne room. Then, his hands stretched out before they curled, leaving a single finger in the air, and then with speed and focus he began drawing up runic lines that went around in a spiral shape. Surprisingly, they all remained in space without clearing away as the scholar just continued drawing for close to about 5 minutes before finally. His left palm slammed towards the middle of the runic incantation. The air flapped as Ryuk watched space collapse onto itself from the center of the rune circle, before quickly widening, and soon enough there was a pitch-black vortex in the center of the room. This, younglings, is the gate to the soulful ruin of Niagara. Go in and venture through its dangers. No matter how hard it is, you must press forth regardless, and verily I can assure you that those of you who continue forth with consistency and hope shall meet in the end rewards beyond your very imagination. The king said, his words going through the hearts of everyone, even before he pointed towards the vortex. Now go, and when you return, then you shall be something more, and ready to become even greater. He said, and without hesitation, all of the younglings began to enter one by one, soon disappearing into the vortex. Ryuk was the last person to remain as he noted all of the elders focused their gaze at him. But then he turned to the king, who nodded his head. Along with you too, Ryuk, the king said, and without any further doubt, Ryuk took a step forward to appear before the vortex. If the soulful ruin of Niagara really is the same reward posted in the trial of Morta Niagara, then venturing into this portal is the only way I can get to it. Whatever the truth is, I'd have to through this to be safe. Besides, this might finally get to be some sort of training for my weary bones. It's been a long time since I stretched them last anyway. Ryuk silently thought to himself before he gave one last look at High Scholar Emeries, who gave a nod of acknowledgement before he fully stepped into the portal. And once he disappeared, the runic portal faded away from the middle of the hall, bringing nothing but silence through everyone in the room. Now, I know what the raging question is, King Orimes said as he looked at the elders who had their gaze furrowed at him. You all want to know who or what the one referred to as Ryuk is, right? And why he is allowed to go into the revered gate of soulless ruin, undergo the coming-of-age ceremony, and even get a chance at the soulful ruin of Niagara while not being a silver runic, don't you? King Orimes asked, and the silence that preceded was more than enough of an answer. The reason is simple. When Ryuk stepped in, it was the same sensation of descending through any other portal. But this time, he couldn't help but notice the portal seemed a bit tighter, as if he was traveling through a slender pipe thinner than normal. But it didn't take long for him to feel himself reaching the end of the pipe, and when next he opened his eyes, he felt himself soaring downwards with speed, and when he turned his gaze below him, what the? The sight not only left Ryuk surprised but even his lips twitching as looked beneath himself. and saw a gaping maw filled with nightmarish eyes and massive fangs dripping with dark venom opening right below. He was rapidly soaring downward, wind whipping past his body with intense speed. "Talk about a horror welcome," he muttered to himself as he descended into the gut of the monstrous creature. The beast instinctively snapped its maw shut with a thunderous ripple that echoed through the entire area. But a second had barely passed before the creature's head began to swell unnaturally, inflating like a balloon, as if its head was being pumped filled with air, and then brain matter, dark blood, and slime exploded outward in all directions, followed by an eerie, ear-piercing, mournful shriek that was quickly cut off. The creature's massive body plummeted downward with a powerful crash. Hovering midair above the devastation was none other than Ryuk, golden particles of energy swirling around his body like fine dust, shimmering like shards of starlight. Calmly, he descended, landing lightly on the corpse. His eyes quickly scanned the surrounding, and he was quick to discover that he wasn't alone. Around him, the other Silverunics stood atop similar corpses, each having slain one of the monstrous beasts. But none of them were celebrating, because below their feet was bubbling lava, not red but pitch black. The surface rippled akin to a crocodile rushing forward on a lake towards a wounded and bloodied prey. Except whatever lurked beneath wasn't crocodilian. The ripples made it clear, these were predators far larger, darker, and far more dangerous. And then chaos unfurled. The nightmarish roars of the ancient beasts echoed all around Ryuk as 7 gigantic, whale-like monsters burst out from the pitch-black lava, mouths open in monstrous anticipation, releasing a disgusting stench. Their massive maws closed in from every angle, all seeking to tear Ryuk apart. Yet he stood still, not at all bothered. When the beasts came within 10 meters of tearing him to pieces, he raised his legs and then, he took a single step forward, his boot lightly tapping against the humongous corpse of the sea creature beneath him. And in that moment, reality seemed to shatter as the space around him compressed. The creatures that had flown in, eager to devour him, seemed to have been slammed with sledgehammers both above and below. They flattened instantly like paper pressed in a vise, and then, one after another, the 7 monstrous whales exploded into bursts of flesh and black blood, their remains splashing uselessly into the lava below with their blood splashing outwards in a powerful burst. None of it ever reached Ryuk, though, as their speed considerably slowed down the closer they got to him before finally falling into the lava below. "Host has deactivated Draconic Death March," the system announced as Ryuk floated inches above the ground. His eyes remained calm, but now silently accessing everything ongoing around him. Boom! Explosions rang all around as the remaining Silverunics began battling the creatures. A powerful wave of Ethiers was what faced these beasts that seemed endless as explosions resounded from every corner. Their intent was clear: devour everything, and the Silverunics' intents were clear: survive. But through all the chaos, Ryuk remained untouched, watching it unfold like an audience member at a distant play. He did nothing, only observed to see how the Silverunics would deal with the dangers they were currently faced with so suddenly. To his surprise, they adapted instantly. Most summoned their weapons, laced with brilliant silvery light and inscribed ancient runes. Swords, spears, and bows shimmered into their hands. A surge of energy erupted from them as they charged. One guy raised his massive broadsword and sent a powerful silvery arc cutting straight completely through a single whale with a single sweep of his hands. Another hurled a spear, the impact unleashing a wave of light that tore a hole through 3 dark lava whales before extinguishing its momentum. But the most breathtaking sight was the one that instantly soared into the air. Brilliant silvery light bloomed out of her hands, soon revealing a peculiar weapon. It was a bow made of fine silvery crystal, its true from concealed by the powerful quantity of Etherius oozing from the runes along its curves. As the creatures rushed at her, she calmly raised her right hands. A silvery vortex appeared above her, and something soon came out of it, landing in her grasp. It was an arrow charged with crackling silvery energy, and she placed it to the tip of the string, pulling as far back as 1/2 meter before she then released it. Boom! Shockwaves followed as the singular arrow split into a dozens raining down like heaven's own judgment. Each dark beast was pinned and pierced, reduced from scary monsters into skewered meat. They writhed, screamed, and finally drowned in the lava. Ryuk watched impressed at the girl, and surprisingly, it was none other than Filiana who slowly descended from the sky, coming to stand on the corpse of one of the creatures, her gaze scanning the battlefield. Her attack was a wild area, one that had helped cleared the way, giving the other Silverunics breathing room. They regrouped, nodded toward her in silent gratitude, then turned back to their surroundings to properly access things. And for a moment, Filiana's eyes met Ryuk's, who was standing leisurely in the air, her expression holding a faint crease as he looked around Ryuk and found everything to be perfectly calm. It was like the creature had simply decided to not attack him. Ryuk held her gaze for a second before turning away to observe the surroundings. There was no clear path forward, just a molten field covered in bubbling, black lava. The terrain was worse than treacherous. The lava seemed sentient, eager to burn through skin and soul alike, the only thing acting as a step hold over it none other than floating pieces of dark rocks floating chaotically around. Raising his head to the sky, thick storm clouds were everywhere with not a single glimmer of light. Instead, streaks of black lightning occasionally descended from the clouds with speed, crashing into the lava, and blasting a hole so deep that the ground below the lava, seemingly at a depth of about 100 meters, could be seen faintly before quickly getting filled by the dark lava. How interesting! So, what's the plan? What direction? One of the Silverunics asked, as they looked silently amongst each other. Before them stretched a vast, unending plateau reeking of destruction and death. And here they were, standing on the back of lava whales, which were slowly sinking deeper and deeper into the molten ground. They knew the assignment: walk through this first level and pass through all the dangers, but they didn't have any map or direction as to where the door to the second level was. Should they go west, south, north, or east? Where could the door be? Should they part ways or stick together? What if they stuck together and still went in the wrong direction? Then it would take forever to reach their destination. But sticking together also meant their chances of facing monumental threats and surviving increases compared to being alone. We're a total of 24, are we not? A male voice rang through the area, coming from the tallest and seemingly most mature of them. A boy with long silvery hair flailing behind him while a huge broadsword resting on his back. His name was Tavalano, and he was seemingly the oldest in class. If so, let's split into 8 groups, each consisting of 3 members. 3 people working together would be better than going into these places solo. Each group will pick a random, different direction and head off, cut through all the dangers ahead, and find the end. If you reach the end of wherever your direction is and you meet with a blockade, then come back here and wait in this place, he said, as he stretched his hand to the side, forging the light phantom of a silvery white blade which he dug into the corpse of the whale beast. Immediately, a powerful silvery light bloomed into the sky, turning into a skyward trail of light that reached into the dark clouds. This will be the guide. Come here and wait for the others if you were met with a blockade. If you didn't return, that would mean one thing. Either your direction is the correct path and you've already gone to the second level of this ruin, or your group was wiped out. Whatever it is, the other groups, once they all arrive, can follow and come check on you. This light sword will remain here for a day before going off, so we all only have 24 hours. If you find the portal to the next level, then no need to come back, just go in and continue to the next level. We will all follow that direction and join you. Is that understood? Tavalano asked the Silverunics, who all furrowed their eyebrows before they silently nodded. That truly was a safe plan, and so they all instantly began choosing amongst each other. A total of 3 members coming together to stand side by side, and Ryuk remained motionless, until he suddenly noticed a person point a finger at him. You, she said. Me? Ryuk asked, looking at Filiana. Yes, you. Would you like to join our group? TSK. More like we don't have a choice but to choose him. We're the only incomplete group. A side voice came, and Ryuk turned to Eliana, who rolled her eyes at her sister. And when he looked around the area, truly, he realized all the groups had already been formed. Only Emelian and Filiana were standing together. They needed one more person, and Ryuk was the only one left. Safe to say, neither he nor the pair had a choice but to stick together in the end. Fine. Seems like that's been settled, Tavalano said, as Ryuk shrugged before moving to the side of Emelian and Filiana. The plan is simple, but I'll summarize once more. Go as far as you can, reach the end, and stay alive. If you meet with a wall, then come back using the light sword as reference to find your way back. If you also meet a danger too much for you to handle, then use the light sword to return here. We'll deal with it together. If on the other hand you're lucky enough to find a portal, then enter into it. Your case will be taken as the correct path. Whatever you do, the only thing that matters is surviving. Retreat if you come across a foe too powerful. And regroup. I wish you all good luck, he said, before he instantly ran off with his group of 3. And quickly, the trio raced into the distance with speed. Once they were gone, the remaining others instantly took to their heels, also dipping quickly as Ryuk watched everyone dispersing into different directions, and soon it was just their group remaining with the sword beam. We go there! Eliana's voice rang out as she also took a different direction and began walking quickly, followed by her sister who kept behind her. Ryuk looked at the light sword stuck in the corpse for a while before his hand spread forward, and a wave of ether came gushing out, flowing into the sword beam. The resulting light from the sword beam momentarily became even brighter. Now, it will truly last for a day and not just 6 hours, he silently thought, before quickly following after the girls. Filiana, you dumb goof! The remark rang out through the dark lava valley, as the image of 2 girls overlapped, racing into the distance while a figure silently trailed behind them. What is it this time, Eliana? Filiana said with an eye roll, turning to look at her white-skinned sister, whose gaze held a livid expression. Why did you have to choose the machine boy? We could have gone for Tavalano. He's the strongest and hence more chance of surviving what's ahead. When did you stop using our brain to think? You dumb goof, Eliana whispered under her breath, as if trying to make sure no one else was hearing. But the words were as loud as lightning due to the silence, but Ryuk simply ignored it. Shut it, Eliana. You're the dumb goof. Oh? How so? You only want Tavalano because you have a crush on him. And also, he was the first to choose his group and didn't choose you. If he wanted you, he would have chosen you, but he didn't want you, okay? So shut it and stop blaming it on me. Tisich, you dumb goof. Or maybe, if you weren't standing so close to me, he would have picked me as part of the group, Eliana protested. But Filiana was unfazed as she replied. Or if he truly wants you, he would have asked for both of us to join his group. Or maybe he just didn't like your dark face, she roared back. And maybe you should stop drooling over an idiot who doesn't even like your sister. You dumb goof. Hey, that's my line, you dumb goof. The sound of a throat clearing echoed, and both girls stopped their bickering, turning their attention to Ryuk, who was calmly following after them. But Eliana's face contorted as she looked at Ryuk and noticed he was more floating in the air than running like them. A single tap and he would soar close to 10 meters straight before landing on the next rock, and then soar again. Just how is he even doing that? Cheater. There's danger up ahead, 20 meters away. About 70 larva whales in a circular formation, Ryuk informed them. Filiana stretched her hand to the side, and light filled her palm as her bow quickly appeared. She soon brought out her arrow, formed the vortex, knocking one on the string and pulling far back, all without ever stopping her running motion for a second. Stop goofing around, Ellie. We've got a floor to clear, Filiana said as she rushed forward with even more speed, both her legs stomping hard on a floating rock before she launched high into the air and then, boom! She released the arrow, which, just like before, instantly turned into missiles raining down on the sharks below, who released mournful shrieks from beneath the dark lava. But this time, unlike before, when they were instantly ripped through, the arrows were simply stuck in their thick skin before the creatures continued swimming forward with speed, toward Ryuk and Eliana. They've gotten stronger? Ryuk thought to himself, noting the increased resilience of the sharks. But then, he watched as Eliana soared forward with unreal speed, becoming a phantom of light. And at the last second, Ryuk watched a powerful wave of light bloom in her hands as the sheath of a sword appeared in Filiana's hands. She twisted her wrist, gripping the handle of the sword before. The peculiar sound of a katana being unsheathed rang out, and for a millisecond, the light in the world seemed to fade away. The only thing left being the straight silvery lines that raked forward with speed, and then the sound of swords unsheathing rang out as the whales finally reached him, but then watched them burst into well-diced pieces of flesh and blood. A total of 10 of these larva whales were instantly slaughtered by the unsheathing of Eliana's katana. But she wasn't stopping just yet as she flashed forward once more. Boom! For an entire second, there was nothing but the ceaseless sound of arrows raining down from the sky like the wrath of the heavens, and the spectacular sound of a blade in motion, slicing through scores of creatures, reducing them to slices. Ryuk simply ran through the chaos of it all, blood and parts flaying all around him. When he finally arrived at the end, he saw Eliana and Filiana standing side by side, their weapons slowly disappearing back into light before they cast their gazes into the distance. In a little more than 3 minutes, they had dealt with the danger and were now moving forward. They don't seem ruffled at all by the slaughter too, he noted, but then watched as Eliana turned her head to look at him. Hey, why didn't you join in the attack? Too weak to make any impact. Eliana mocked, but all she got was a sentence. It's not my time yet. Oh really? When will it be your time then? After all the danger has been cleared? She responded with a cold snort. Ryuk looked into the distance, a blue ring of light flashing in his eyes, and he grinned, something that didn't escape the gaze of both twins. When that monster arrives, he replied. Both twins instantly turned their heads forward, and that's when their eyes widened in shock as they watched a powerful hail of larva storms flashing toward them with speed. The middle of the storm was blown apart as something rushed forward, whipping toward them, moving at triple the speed of the previous larva whales, and just when their weapons prepared to rise in their defense, they watched a head stick out of the ground, revealing a creature that seemed half humanoid and half monstrosity. Its maw opened wide, and a black light condensed within its throat before. A powerful, ear-deafening roar that sent out pulsating sonic shockwaves left the creature's maw. Its effect, the twin instantly paused in their steps, unable to move an inch forward. A paralyzing sonic attack, Filiana said, as her hand, midway through pulling her string, paused. The same happened to Eliana, whose hand were mere inches from the hilt of her katana. But then they watched a second attack quickly follow. A pitch-black light that seemed like a ball of darkness made its way toward the twins with heaven-defying speed. They twin burst out with what all the wave of etheric energy they could, trying to free themselves from the bind. They managed to do it, except that the ball of darkness would reach them before they had the chance to unleash their attacks. They both quickly prepared themselves for impact, conjuring a barrier with their will. But then Eliana's eyes flashed in shock as she felt a hand grab the hilt of her sword and pull it out in one swift stroke. The sound of the sword leaving the sheath was nerve-ripping, but the sound that followed after, it was like iron cutting through the thickness of steel, powerful sparks sparking from the collision of power. Yet, they watched as the hand holding the katana pressed forward, cleaving the entire ball into two as its halves landed on the lava by the side. Kaboom! The devastation resulted in a massive explosion of larvae flying off in all directions, the temperature in the surroundings monumentally increasing. Quite the fine sword you have here, Eliana. Mind if I borrow it for a bit? Ryuk asked as he turned his head behind him. But then, he noticed the twins instead had their jaws wide open in shock as they looked into the sky above his head. Ryuk slowly turned his gaze, and finally saw the reason for their pause. Right above them, 30 meters in the air, with dark lava trailing beneath it, was a 5-meter-tall monstrosity. It looked like a mixture of a shark and a human. A burly, large body with 2 scaly arms ending in gnarled claws, a huge head that held rows of sharp, homodont teeth, and a sharp, blade-like protrusion running down its spine. Its legs were angled like that of a beast with fins at their end trailing behind it, the reason why it could barely swim in the lava. And right now, it was soaring forward with speed toward the trio, its claws expanding faster than one could blink. "I'll take your silence as a yes, Eliana," Ryuk said, and in the next instant, he moved his leg forward. A powerful thump resounded as his right foot smashed into the ground beneath him, sending cracks across the platform they stood on, and then Ryuk's body followed suit, his right hand lunging forward with the katana heading straight toward those razor-sharp claws. Clang! Boom! The fiery collision was the final straw that broke the calm as the step hold, which was already enveloped in cracks from Ryuk's earlier stump, quickly began cracking faster from the force. Eliana and Felania immediately jumped away before they could be sent flying down into the lava. But then, they watched as Ryuk remained, his sword colliding harshly with the claws, amidst the sound of flying dark sparks. Slowly, he was being pressed down deep into the lava as the strength of the monster was even more immense and more cracks formed from the step hold which began sinking deeper. And just when Ryuk's fate of dipping into the larva seems inevitable, bang! A thunderous explosion resounded as Ryuk's left fist blasted out, smashing into the face of the humanoid shark and sending it flying into the air from where it came. The resulting explosion broke the rocks into tiny bits, but then his feet gently tapped against the lava surface as he calmly stepped backward, leaving nothing but a slight ripple on the surface of the lava before he finally came to a stop above another platform. But his image turned into dots of light right after as he rushed forward with blinding speed. Roar! A powerful beastly roar echoed from the depths of the lava as the croc monster burst out from the lava in fury while flashing with speed toward Ryuk, and halfway, both collided with power. With mouths agape, Eliana and Felania watched Ryuk and the humanoid crocodile turn into nothing but a blur, huge holes being blown into the lava occasionally, and sometimes, lightning-like light would cross in the air, shockwaves radiating outward constantly without end. "We have to help him," Felania said. "But how?" Elian replied as she watched her sister instantly knock her bow and turned it into the air, preparing to release, only them both to find nothing but dispersing shockwaves. And then, boom! A powerful explosion resounded from the side as Filiana quickly returned her bow to the side, preparing to fire, only to see nothing but a deep hole in the lava, and once more she turned behind her to find the same thing happening, and then right in the sky overhead and by her side, and then deep in the lava again. I can't keep up with their speed. Boom! A powerful explosion rang out as Ryuk felt himself soaring through the lava, the powerful shockwave igniting the end of the lava beneath him, blasting it away from impact and sparing his back from the molten flow as he spun in the air before his legs gently stepped onto the charred ground. But then, boom! The floor before him shattered into pieces as the shark creature slammed down into the ground, rising up to both its powerful feet, its pitch-dark eyes staring down at Ryuk with intense, killing intent. "Seems like we only got 10 seconds to finish this, eh?" Ryuk said as he noticed the dark lava had already begun moving back, and he only had 10 seconds before it covers up the area. "Fine by me," he muttered as he pointed his sword toward the monster that instantly snarled as it opened its lips. A dark ball of energy brewed in the depth of its maw, aiming forward. Roar! The first thing was, of course, the paralyzing shockwave that instantly caught Ryuk, who had nowhere to go from the encroaching lava space and could only resist it head-on. His body remained upright in a semi-frozen position, the katana stuck in a pointing stance against the dark ball of energy that came. It was released in the next second, but the monster didn't just stop there, as it also followed behind the dark ball of energy. Its claws cleaved toward Ryuk's head from the side at the same time. The instant attacks resulted in Ryuk's hair flapping wildly, falling in, as he seemed pretty doomed to have his head blown from both the dark ball and the approaching claw, while doing nothing but standing paralyzed. Yet even though he was paralyzed, one could watch as his lips spread into a large grin, and in the next instant, he moved. Boom! The entire space around Ryuk exploded into nothing as he seemingly yanked himself off space's paralyzing trick, and in an instant, the katana cleaved with insane speed, a powerful golden wave of etherius bursting out from every single rune on the katana's blade. It first appeared before the ball, cleaving it into two halves and continuing forward toward the claws reaching for him. Dark blood spurted out into the air as the croc monster's eyes shook in horrid confusion, watching as a clawed hand soar into the air, and it rose upright, turning its gaze to its own wrist, which was now a stump that continually let loose dark blood. A mournful screech filled the lips of the crocman as it instantly turned toward Ryuk behind it. But then, it was pierced at the exact same time as Ryuk dipped the katana forward, and it tore straight into the croc's heart, piercing through the ribs, heart, and skin in one stroke before finally bursting out from its back. Blood gushed down the lips of the croc as it looked at its own chest, taking in its unmistakable fate of death, and its gaze raised up to look at its foe, whose eyes held no ripple. It was fun while it lasted. Those were the last words it heard as it instantly cleaved its claw toward Ryuk's head, trying to sever it in one last desperate attempt to drag its foe down with it. But then, the katana flashed upward straight into the air, and Ryuk stepped back at the same time, dodging the claw by an inch. The croc monster knees gave out as it landed face flat on the ground, only for its upper body to fall into two slices as it collapsed helplessly onto the ground, deader than dead. Exactly 8 seconds, Ryuk mused to himself, and in the next instant, he tapped his feet on the ground, soaring high into the sky just before the lava covered the ground. He managed to appear behind the Silverinic twin, who felt the shift in the air, and then, thump! Ryuk's hand grabbed the magnified fist just inches before it slammed into his face as he smirked, looking at Eliana, who slowly took back her hands. For a second, she had thought it was the croc monster who survived and not Ryuk. "Here," Ryuk said, passing her back her katana as Eliana's eyes flashed before she took it and kept it in her sheath. "No borrowing next time," she shot back, as Ryuk clicked his tongue before muttering, "You really are a dumb goof." "What the? You? Dumb goof? I'm the royal princess of—" "Ow!" Eliana screamed as she turned to look at Filiana, who rolled her eyes at him. "Shut up, dumb goof. And that croc monster?" Filiana asked as Ryuk nodded his head, before his gaze then furrowed. "It's dead. But its cultivation?" he muttered, and unknown to the two girls, the golden panel was blinking in and out. "Congratulations, host, for defeating an Eiden Lord ranked monster. Rewards? Plus 75,000 EXP. It's an Eiden Lord ranked monster," Filiana whispered under her breath, and Ryuk nodded. "If any of the others met with that, would they be able to kill it?" he asked as Filiana's eyebrow furrowed. One had to know they were all at the Cymancer stage, and above the Cymancer stage is the Eiden Lord rank stage, which was the stage the monster that had just tried to kill them was. If Filiana had to fight that monster alone, she knew things would be close. Very close. Even she, who worked with bows and arrows, struggled to keep up with the monster's speed. Running away would be a suicide note, and fighting back would be almost impossible. Whatever it was, it would be incredibly difficult to fight an Eiden Lord ranked monster. At least it's 3-1. Better than only one. If Eliana and I were to fight with another person, not you, against that croc monster, then we would have fought differently. "They're not completely hopeless," Eliana replied with certainty as Ryuk simply casually nodded before continuing into the distance, and he was quickly followed by the twin. But this time, he couldn't help but notice they had their weapons in hand, ready to be used at a moment's notice. This place wasn't somewhere they could walk around and not hold their weapons in hand. "Hey, Eliana," the voice rang out beside Ellie, who turned her head to look at her sister. "What's it? Do you think there could be more of those croc monsters lurking beneath the lava?" Filiana asked, her voice barely concealing the horror in it. I don't think so, but it'll be safer if we run faster," Eliana replied as both twins sped up instantly. After running for the next 15 minutes straight, they finally arrived in an area that wasn't filled with just lava. It was the hard, dark ground filled with burnt rocks, looking something like a shore, except it didn't house water but lava. The feeling of finally getting to land was exhilarating as the twin sisters sped up even more, trying to reach for the floor, only for them to both have their shoulders grabbed at the last second, instantly stopping them before they could step into it. They paused their motion before turning to Ryuk, who released their shoulders, his eyebrows furrowed at his surroundings suspiciously. "Something wrong?" Filiana asked as Ryuk's gaze looked at the lava and the hard ground before him, thought flashing in his head before he asked. "You know this, the lava and the ground. It all looks like a sea, right?" he asked, and the twins nodded. "And I know, the waves of the sea crash heavily on the shore, don't they? This one isn't. It's like it's mysteriously paused here by some force." Ryuk noticed as his eyes began flashing around, and in the next instant, the sound of a sword leaving its sheath rang out as Eliana pulled out her katana, turning her back to Ryuk and Filiana, who took her remaining space, knocking her bow straight and preparing to shoot. If Ryuk had said his observations to an Apex energy cultivator, they would have thought him sick in the head. But the twin sisters were Etherius cultivators, and they knew there was an important danger factor to things abnormal. "An illusion?" Filiana asked, and the instant she said those words, the trio instantly turned back to the shore, and that was when they watched it unfurl like reality itself was peeling away, and the scene rapidly changed. From what used to be the hard stony ground, it became an endless sinking abyss, its depth with no visible end as dark mist covered it. And right by the side was a wooden bridge that creaked silently, the only visible pavement to cross the abyss. "Exactly?" Eliana replied as they looked at the wooden bridge that was suspended alone with the unending abyss. If they had continued running, they all would have likely fallen into the abyss, and that would most likely signal their end. "Seems like I'm really getting used to this illusion thingy," Ryuk silently thought to himself as the trio looked around at each other. "What now? We continue forward, right? After all, we have met no blockade yet," Filiana asked, and with a nod from the duo behind her, she took the first step forward on the wooden bridge. Surprisingly enough, it was fairly quite stable, and quickly the remaining duo climbed onto it before they resumed moving. This time, there was no running around. As the deeper they walked on the bridge, the more the temperature seemed to drop, and the bridge was now starting to slowly wane around unstably. Ryuk's eyes were flashing in thought as he walked through the bridge. There was something boring into his mind. If truly the land was an illusion, which it is, and led to the revelation of this abyss beneath, then, who set up the illusion? He silently thought to himself, but soon noticed Eliana and Filiana, pausing in their feet as his gaze instantly locked into the distance. And so fast, his answers were revealed. As standing, obscured by the mist around 50 meters away, was a lone silhouette. The sound of unhurried footsteps echoed across the bridge as the trio watched the lone figure approach. He stopped about 20 meters away, his features now visible under the misty veil. The figure was draped in robes, though his hands and feet were clearly visible, humanoid, white, and covered in the same silvery runes as any other silver runic. Eliana and Fien's hands wavered for a second. Then, they watched as the figure slowly removed the hood from his head, revealing his face. Ryuk raised an eyebrow at the sight. The figure was anything but a monster, and Ryuk's guess was spot on. Truly was a silver runic. That skin white as freshly fallen snow, with runic lines that trailed by the sides of his head. His hair was a mixture of dirty brown and silvery white, and his face was by no means young. He looked like a lost male silver runic in his 40s. Eliana sheathed her sword while Filian lowered her bow. "You? Who are you?" she asked, but in the next instant, the bridge groaned under pressure as the figure's silhouette faded into the mist, and before the swords and bows could be drawn again, two sharp blades shot forward, tearing toward Eliana and Filiana's faces. Their eyes widened in shock, watching the blade pierce at their foreheads, only for the trajectory to suddenly change, slicing instead at the sides of their eyes. "Arg!" Two yelps of pain echoed from both twins, but they recovered quickly. Boom! The katana instantly left its sheath as Filiana slashed forward with speed toward the silhouette, while Eliana fired her arrows, their shimmering lights covering the entire field of view. They watched as the silhouette dodged both the arrows and the strike with unnatural flexibility, eventually halting its movement again after gaining a considerable distance. Tsh! A silent groan of disappointment escaped the figure's lips, But his eyes weren't on Filiana or Eliana. They were focused on the boy behind them who haven't seemed to move yet. That attack should have been enough to kill the girls once their guard was lowered. But that boy. He moved at the same time I did, diverting the blades away from piercing their foreheads at the last second. And he isn't even holding any clear weapon at all, just standing there unlike the other two. What's sure is, he doesn't have the silver runes on the side of his ears. He's definitely not a Silverunic and most likely doesn't trust them either, hence why he didn't fall for it. Just, what is he? Anno mused to itself, as its gaze unconsciously moved toward its skin, watching the hairs on its arms standing on end for reasons unknown. Ryuk's eyes were calm, almost disinterested, as he looked at the retreating silhouette. Then he turned his gaze to Eliana and Filiana, who were now using their spare hands to wipe away the blood oozing from the cuts at the sides of their eyes, their teeth clenched in pain. Both unconsciously stepped backward as Ryuk stepped forward, giving them time to stop the bleeding. Hope that teaches both of you a lesson. That just because it looks like you, doesn't mean it is you. You let your guard down for a second, you die? Ryuk's cold voice rang in the ears of the twins, leaving a sinking thump in their chests. For a second there, they had truly let their guard down. And the reason was simple. Unlike most enemies they had faced who were outright monsters, the person before them was, at first glance, clearly a Silverunic. The feeling of familiarity had overtaken them, resulting in the lowering of their weapons and guards. And the enemy had used against them. If not for Ryuk's swift intervention, those blades would have run through their heads, and they would have been killed in a single clean stroke. The thought of death echoed loudly in their heads, pressing down on their minds as both of their eyes glinted with rage. You? The silhouette suddenly called out. Not to them, but to Ryuk, who looked at him before he began stepping forward. And with a voice that rang loud and clear through the abyss, he asked, "Why do I feel like you could have stopped those blade attacks and crushed them if you wanted? But you consciously diverted them instead, just to make sure your teammates were harmed by it, Did you really need to risk their heads being pierced through just to teach them a lesson?" The figure's voice rang out again. Eliana and Filian's brows furrowed at Ryuk's back, but when he didn't deny it, they both frowned harder. "Some things can only be learned the hard way," Ryuk said, not at all turning away from the accusation. The figure's eyes shook slightly before he muttered, "That's pretty sick, no? To have a teammate like you on their side. The trust they should have given you should have been no different from that of a monster." He raised his voice again but watched as Ryuk paused in his. If I was wary of you previously on a scale of 7 out of 10 before, it just dropped to a 3. Ryuk's voice cut through coldly, leaving Anno speechless, but Ryuk resumed his walking. "I've been wondering, if the shore was but an illusion, who was it that set it up then? And then I found you standing alone on the bridge, the only support to a cold abyss. Who but foolish kids in need of experience would think you're not the one who cast the illusion and assume you're one of them instead? How stupid is that? Finding a lost Silverunic in the gate of soulless ruin. Standing on a bridge just a few creeks away from sending everyone to Theer death. And now that your identity has been discovered, you're trying to use a sliver of truth to sow discord among us. Trying to weaken our bonds with your words. After all, a friend whose loyalty is suspicious is worse than an outright enemy. Isn't that right?" Ryuk said, stopping just 10 meters from the figure, whose eyes now glowed faintly with flickering crimson. "But all that just points to one sickening fact about you illusionists," Ryuk muttered, a devilish grin slowly curling on his lips as they moved slowly and the words came out clearly. "You are weak." Immediately, those words were uttered. It was like bombs had been set off as the illusionists roared out in anger. Boom! Powerful crimson light burst forward as the dark robe he had put on was instantly erased, revealing an abnormal body. A body with about 6 elongated blades sticking out from his sides like arms. And before Ryuk could fully take in the sight, it was already before him, as his figure rushed forward towards him, his blades piercing out towards him. "Weak, you say? Then survive me," he roared out loud. Ryuk grinned evilly before he took a single step forward, and then, boom! He pierced forth like a bullet unleashed, appearing before the illusionist in an instant. The sound of blades ripping into flesh rang out as all of the daggers penetrated Ryuk, tearing through him from behind. Gasps escaped the lips of the Silverunic twin. Yet through the pain, Ryuk grinned like an eerie beast. His hand reached out, grabbing the illusionist by the head. "Just like I said, you are weak mentally. And now it has killed you," he declared. Anno's eyes flashed in horror as he watched Ryuk slowly lift him up by his head. He struggled hard, the blades sinking in and out of Ryuk's body. But Ryuk stood strong, undeterred by pain. The twins watched in disbelief as Anos' body was tossed away into the distance and soon disappeared down the abyss, leaving behind a heart-chilling trail. No! As he descended into the abyss, he was never to be found again. "You threw him down?" The voice rang out behind Ryuk as he felt Flana and Eliana's presence appear behind him. "Yes, I did," Ryuk said calmly, watching the twins take a step back in shock. And then, the sound of a katana leaving its sheath rang out, followed by an arrow being knocked as Ryuk turned to look at the girls. Both had their weapons unsheathed and directed at him. "You killed him knowing he was a Silverunic," Eliana roared back at him. Ryuk rolled his eyes. "And you forget he had those blades of his. He could have dragged us all down to hell with him by cutting off the bridge once he felt his safety threatened. And for that reason he had to be killed, and swiftly too. Now stop acting like kids and take your weapons off me," Ryuk said as Filian's gaze wavered, but not Eliana's. "You! I can see it now," Eliana hissed. "It never crossed your mind at all." "What's that?" Ryuk asked, perplexed. "The fact that he was a Silverunic. You never saw that. Ever since you laid eyes on him. Your eyes. They looked at him no different from the way your eyes looked at that croc monster. Is that how you see us Silverunics? No different from monsters?" she roared. Her katana was about to leave its sheath completely, but Filiana grabbed her wrist. "That's enough, Eliana. No, Filiana. Look at his eyes. He sees us no different from monsters to be slaughtered mercilessly," Eliana shouted, pushing Filiana back. Ryuk's eyes slowly turned cold. "You have 10 seconds to sheath that sword. If you don't, I'll kill you both," Ryuk declared, his voice chilling the girls to their bones. Filiana backed off from him, but Eliana pressed forward. "Then I'll sever the bridge and bring you down to hell with us," she threatened. Ryuk's eyes flashed, his eyes flashing with disbelief before it all soon faded into a grin that slowly began widening before. "Ha ha ha!" Uncontrollable laughter burst out from Ryuk's lips as he laughed out his lungs, holding onto the bridge for support. Eliana clicked her tongue and held her aim, but they waited as Ryuk finally calmed down. His face twitched with disbelief between bursts of breath before he finally stopped and asked, "Have you both forgotten that I can fly?" Ryuk asked as the twins' lips hung open. They watched Ryuk slowly hovering off the ground effortlessly. "I killed him because I was afraid of both of you falling down the bridge with him if he severed it. I killed him for you, and now you turn your weapons against me. Calling me a monster?" Ryuk's voice echoed calmly through the abyss, yet it was like the sound of thunder blasting in the ears of Filiana and Eliana, whose eyes flashed in shock as they looked at Ryuk levitating in the air. In the end, his words were right. Neither of them, including the illusionists, could fly. So, if the bridge had been severed, both of them would have fallen to their deaths. Ryuk would have been the only one to live. He could fly for some unknown reason. In the end, he had killed the Silverunic because he was afraid for them, afraid of them falling to their deaths. In the end, he had been fighting for them. Their eyes dawned in Realizadin as they turned to look at Ryuk, but when they met his gaze, they unconsciously took a step back. His eyes, they had lost something, a warmth that used to remain in them before whenever he stared at them. And faintly, a thump rang through their hearts. And then they watched as he turned his back and silently continued his walk on the bridge, his back disappearing into the mists. "Hey, wait, Eliana tried to say as they both quickly chased after his figure. But when they stepped just 50 meters more forward, what they saw astounded them. A revolving gate in the air with a rune engraved number 2, and Ryuk was nowhere to be found. The second level of the Gate of Soul's ruin. We've reached the end of the first level, Filiana said as she looked at the vortex gate. But Eliana's gaze dimmed. He left? She whispered as her teeth gritted together, intense guilt filling her heart. He had fought for them ever since they had started as a team. And how had she repaid him? By pointing her sword at him and referring to him as a monster. We'll get a chance to make it up to him once we complete the trial and return back home. Now we focus on the trial ahead and survive, Filiana said, patting her sister on the back. And together, they continued their walk and entered into the vortex, their figures fading within. They're still young, Ryuk. Don't let it get to you. The system notification flashed as Ryuk walked through the broken dimension. Yes, broken dimension. As there were broken platforms and buildings suspended in the air, fragments of destroyed floating along as if gravity didn't exist at all. And jumping from one platform to another was none other than Ryuk, with the same cold, emotionless gaze. Ryuk? The system notification flashed once more as Ryuk continued his step. You've let it get to your heart. The panel flashed as Ryuk stopped on a platform by the side, before sitting down on it, a deep sigh escaping his lips. It didn't get to my heart, he replied, his voice cold and husky. Then what's with the mood? It's just, Ryuk tried to say, but then the notification flashed again. Familiar, the system said as Ryuk's eyes flashed before he sighed. Yes, familiar. This feels exactly the same as when I fell out with the half-fallen one. Ryuk muttered softly, his memories drifting to that night. I love Morgane. I know now. I've been trying not to think about her these past few days, but I feel it in my bones. I'm missing something. And when the half-fallen one invited me to that dinner, I thought I was finally part of something, a family. And in just a blink, that all changed. 1 second, I was getting the best feeling in my heart, and the next second, a bounty for my death had been placed on my head by the one who I thought could be a family. Now I've fallen completely out with Morgane. I haven't called her ever since and don't even... Ryuk muttered under his breath before halting. I'll fight so hard for people. I'll save their lives and the lives of their own people, and yet they would turn their blade against me and call me a monster on the slightest suspicion. I don't understand, system. Am I doing something wrong? Ryuk muttered to himself in confusion as he looked at his hands, curling them into fists. I don't think so. They just haven't figured you out quite yet. I'm sure they'll realize soon enough and appreciate your efforts. The system notification flashed as Ryuk unfurled his fists, before a thought flickered in his heart. A thought he had been holding down since all these days but finally could no longer keep. Hey, system. I'm here. You know, I've been thinking about the fallout between me and the half-fallen one. I've been thinking what would happen if she knew her worst thoughts were actually true. What if she knows that I'm a null? But to be honest, I don't think I care about her knowing. I'm more afraid of Morgane knowing. What would happen if Morgane knows I'm a null? Would she still love me? Would she still sleep peacefully by my side, knowing I'm of what torments her world? And what of Mad White? Last time when he saw the bounty and me being a null, he laughed it off as impossible and had supported me to go into hiding. But the thought that has gnawed at my mind since then. What if he realized right then and there that, true to the news, I'm a null? Would he have offered for me to go into hiding? Or would he have come for my head himself? Would he still refer to me as his intern? Or would he call me a monster too? And do you know what's crazy about all of this, system? It's that I haven't even unlocked my null bloodline yet. What will happen once I embrace my null bloodline? Once I start cultivating abyssal energy? What would I be then? Something worse than a monster. Of all the people in the world, only Aster could be said to truly understand that I'm a null. But I could see it in her eyes sometimes too, system. Something had changed in her eyes that day she watched me kill that fallen. It's like a light in the depths of her eyes died that day. She saw me differently since then, And I believe everyone will be the same, no exception. You're a null. There's no hiding it or trying to wrap it in candy nylon. You're null, one of the most evil races in the universe. And if my guess is right, you're not just a null. Even amongst nulls, honestly, you're something worse. I can tell that from the little amount of information in my database about you. But if there's one thing I know, it's that you're not a monster. Don't be afraid of anyone calling you a monster either because of what you did, or because they know you're a null. If they know you well enough, then they'll realize you're a null, not a monster. If they call you a monster, it's just because they don't know you. And that's not on you. That's on them. What will bring ruin to you, on the other hand, is thinking that being called a monster is now a reason for you to become one. Be yourself. Be Ryuk Null. Let people who come for you, come for Ryuk Null, not a boy with a null bloodline. I think when you get back to End-Earth, then stop denying what you are. If they realize it, don't deny it. See if they choose you or leave you. If you're in a battle and your own people start leaving you because of the revelation that you're a null, then that will lead to your own downfall faster than you think. Leave the uncontrollable variables alone and do what's in your limit. So, get back up, speed through this trial and go enter the soulful ruin of Niagara. Hopefully, you get taken back to End-Earth after completing it. The system flashed as Ryuk rose up to his feet once more. Inhaling deeply, and in the next instant, he moved, continuing into the distance. The flame had been reignited, and it has resumed burning, for now. Just where is this? Ryuk muttered to himself as he stepped across various floating platforms, racing forward, albeit at a slow and steady pace. He had been moving for 7 hours straight now, and all around him were broken buildings floating in the air. There had been some danger zone, scattered with fragments of ruined structures and oddities. Some places had gravity wells that sucked everything close into them, but he was easily able to pass through this chaotic space without blinking an eye. Still, it seemed to stretch on for miles, making him wonder if this was actually part of a real world. Perhaps it was just a fragment of one, preserved or abandoned and left to float here. But just what could have caused such massive destruction in this place? Ryuk muttered to himself again. The moment he said those words, he paused in his steps as the air around the area suddenly destabilized. With surprise, he noticed as holographic figures began appearing all around him, glitching in and out of existence like projections attempting to cross from the digital realm into reality. Different races stood there: titans, beastmen, mutated beasts, humanoid robotic warriors covered in masks. And they all surrounded him, flickering in and out of existence. A strange ripple suddenly spread from above, and Ryuk turned his gaze upward, just in time to see a figure materializing out of thin air. He was surrounded by unreadable energy, vast, dense, and ancient. A 5-meter-tall being, clad in a jet blue techno-alloy armor, layered with draconic scale plates, trimmed with runic blue lines that pulsed like neons across his body. The armor looks both heavy, yet impossibly sleek, with its center bearing a peculiar insignia of an eye. His face was hidden behind a runic mask seemingly forged from the same material as his cloth, and on it was a wide-opened area where its eyes ought to be expected, with no 2 holes but a long line instead, releasing pulses of blue light from the open space, leaving only his ocean blue hair flowing freely behind him. Behind him was a cape seemingly made of glimmering liquid metal, fluttering unnaturally as it flapped behind him without any sign of air at all. By his side was a hovering blue-covered grimoire, hovering silently as the armored figure descended from the hover in the space directly a meter above. "You have uttered the word of doom," the being said, his voice layered like hundreds of voices speaking at the same time. "And now what has befallen this realm shall befall you. But you will be given the same pass, a fate to fight out your death. These here," he continued, gesturing around, "are those who brought ruin upon this place, and now you will have to fight a total of 3 of them, without pause, to negate your doomed fate." Ryuk looked around him. The glitching figures remained still, all of them frozen as though only his choice could awaken them. But Ryuk's attention was drawn, almost instinctively, to the one holding the book. If everyone else here was locked in a passive mode, waiting while this one figure acted of his own volition and delivered the orders. Then wasn't it likely that he was the strongest among them? This trial was meant for kids at the Cymancer realm, which correlates to the Dominion stage, but Ryuk power level was that of an Eternal. If he wasn't fighting the strongest here, then this would hardly be a challenge. And for that reason, he didn't hesitate. You! He relied calmly, extending his hands, pointing a finger to the futuristic soldier. I choose you. Everything in the realm suddenly paused. The rhythmically floating buildings froze mid-air. The various creatures glitching in and out of existence paused, mid-flicker. Gravity, space, and even time seemed to pause in response to Ryuk's choice. He raised an eyebrow at the sudden stillness, then watched as a miniature rift tore through the fabric of space around the futuristic soldier. His figure began glitching uncontrollably like a broken holographic device. But then, before Ryuk's eyes, the glitching form changed completely. He gained a physical body clearer and more solid than any other holographic figure. His hovering grimoire solidified as well, now floating steadily beside him as he grasped it in his palm. You have triggered a primordial code with your choice. The words didn't come from the blue-armored warrior this time. They resonated throughout the entire space. All primordial laws of the Technoforge ruin are now suspended. New rules have been established. Defeat the Ascendant General Oblivar of the Technoforge ruin and all power of the Technoforge realm will be bestowed upon you, including all of its glitched warriors and zones. Ryuk's heart trembled at the declaration, but his focus remained locked on the futuristic general before him. He watched as the glitched energy around him suddenly exploded outwards. His eyes widened in awe as waves of raw power shook the air. Segments of floating buildings shattered and dropped away. The remaining techno-warriors backed off, leaving behind a wide, open space, nearly 1,000 meters in diameter, for Ryuk and Ascendant General Oblivar. Punishment for failure is death. Good luck. There was a note of mocking amusement in the voice, but Ryuk mere shrugged it off. It would have been death before if I had chosen some random warrior and lost, so this isn't any diff. He said, but went silent as barely a split second later, his eyes flashed, and he instinctively crossed his arms in front of him. Clang! All Ryuk felt was the sound of space being slashed, followed by a flash of blue. A long sword cut through the void and appeared instantly before him, its edge slashing out diagonally straight at him. The collision was the scream of metal clashing against ether as Ryuk was sent flying downwards, disappearing into the unending void below. The eyes of the futuristic warrior flared beneath his runic mask, and in the next instant, it glitched downwards at insane speed. His 3-meter-long sword in his right hand and his grimoire floating behind him. Ryuk hummed as he looked at his body. Both of his hands had a long, deep slash across it, and another diagonal one ran across his chest. Through the tears, he could see pieces of nanotex shimmering beneath the wound. It was the first time something had managed to cut so deep into his new body. Rising to his feet, he could feel the heat from the descending general above. His sword raised overhead as the grimoire floating behind him had its pages open itself before letting out a brilliant flash of runic blue light. And then, it came down like the wrath of a god. Techno-Oblivar art. Digital rend. The voice followed after as a digital slash tore through reality. The arc of his blade left behind a rupture. A searing code shockwave that tore digital threads into the air, forming a fissure between fiction and reality. The realm's world space quivered around it like burnt paper, and Ryuk's eyes flashed as he sensed the weight of the attack. Nice. Really nice, he voiced out, his will gushing out to hardened space beneath him, and then, boom! Ryuk's legs smashed into them, anchoring himself tightly, the power sending cracks across the hardened surface. His body lowered to the ground, his fingers clenched all at once, the power from the heels sucking the air between his hands, and then, roar! A powerful roar boomed through the place as Ryuk's body shot upwards, both fists smashing straight into the edge of the sword. Kaboom! The collision was beyond devastating. Ryuk smashed completely through the space he had hardened, piercing downward for nearly 100 meters before the force gradually brought him to a stop. But then his eyes flashed again. He saw the ascended General Obliver soaring backward too, but suddenly paused before glitching into nothingness and reappearing 50 meters away. He glitched once more, and Ryuk's eyes flared again as he felt the presence. "Behind me!" he uttered, swerving his body into a complete 180-degree turn. His palms stretched out and then, clang! Flames burst outward as Ryuk's hand grabbed, barely, the deadly edge of the sword that slashed toward his neck. Sparks flew, and he locked eyes with the general, grinning. "You're fast," he praised, his second hand instantly piercing forward to grab the general's head. But once more, the general glitched away, appearing 100 meters back with his sword in Ryuk's grasp. But he was barely able to hold onto it for a second when the sword jerked out of his hands, racing back into the general's grip telekinetically. Ryuk's eyes flashed before glancing down at his hand. Right now, his index and middle fingers had been cut off, before turning into glitched energy that disappeared into the void. He had suffered in the first exchange. "I can sense it now, his power and sheer vibration speed. It slices through even my endurance of 1,000 points. This can only mean his power level. It's also at the eternity level," Ryuk muttered under his breath, watching the general levitate in the air briefly before glitching again. He glitched left 50 meters, then reappeared, glitched again front, then appeared behind, then in front again and behind once more. It turned into a full-blown circle, and Ryuk's eyes began rotating furiously in their sockets, barely able to keep up with the speed. "Seems like I'll go all out too," he muttered, taking his gaze off the general. His gaze pointed forward and he uttered, "Activate Sovereign Rewriting." Instantly, from behind Ryuk's back, a destructive beam of glitched energy spiraled downward toward his heart. Yet mere inches before it struck, Ryuk's hand bent unnaturally, appearing directly behind him to the tip of the sword, and he suddenly clenched his fingers. Instantly, boom! The edge of the sword exploded into nothingness as the general shot backward, looking at his weapon, whose tip was now missing. Host has activated Sovereign Life Form skill. Sovereign Rewriting. He calmly turned, glancing at Ascendant General Obliver, who was holding onto a sword with broken edge. Seems like even the glitched energy that sword was made from isn't beyond rewriting, he thought to himself as he stepped forward unhurried, toward the ascended General Obliver. The general looked at his broken sword one last time before it dissolved into nothing but energy. Then, raising his hand forward, he summoned the blue grimoire-like book. It suddenly rushed forward toward his palm, and then, the pages fluttered. A brilliant blue light bloomed from the grimoire. Ryuk watched quietly, analyzing silently as he watched the grimoire closed before moving behind General Obliver's spine and fusing with it. Yes, the grimoire fused with the general. Techno Obliver Art, Protocol Overdrive. This time, the words weren't like 100 people speaking at the same time. It was a hum, low and mechanical. The general's eyes sparked, space fielding statically around him as runic light-emitting lines from the grimoire came together, forming various rune sigils that spun around General Ascendant Obliver before instantly sinking into him, resulting in neon veins of blue light glaring through his body. His cape disintegrated into light, the liquefied metal reforming in both hands. Quickly, it reshaped into a dual weapon. A curved dagger, about 1 meter long, brimming with glitched blue energy and a sharp curved edge, radiating an incredible aura of destruction. The air around the general began to warp, gravity twisting unnaturally. Ascendant General Obliver, once regal, had now changed into a sleeker, sharper form. A pulse bloomed outwards as Ryuk eyed the technoplate pattern around his chest. Suddenly eroded, shifting within and revealing something. A black hole whose depth brewed something that made Ryuk's sign tingle, and then, boom! It poured outward with raw power. A silent, devastating release of glitched energy that rushed toward Ryuk, who slowly grinned as he stepped toward the approaching pillar of glitched energy, his palm spreading forward. A vortex of blue began spinning in his eyes, and instantly, the view of the world around him changed. From destructive glitched energy to a well-arranged assembly of bonds lattices formed. His will gushed out as sovereign rewriting was activated to its max. Ryuk's eyes flashed with endless focus and stillness, all playfulness gone. His thought got to work and they began overwriting the attack, remodifying it, changing the source code built into each specific part, but the attack wasn't stopping, and just when it seemed doomed for Ryuk to be blown through, the general watched as the attack suddenly paused right when it was an inch from touching Ryuk's fingers. Techno Obliver Art, Reform. Protocol Overdrive Negative. Ryuk suddenly whispered out, and in the next instant, boom! The energy that surged toward him instantly turned back, rushing with the same momentum and power toward the ascended general, whose eyes widened in shock. His own attack had been turned against him, rewritten with half the power and momentum.